Everyone, welcome back. This is our third day working on our blog app in Rails. So without wasting any more time, let's see what we're gonna learn today. Today we're gonna see an introduction to one of the most core concepts in Rails called models. And we'll be handling these models in an interactive Ruby terminal, which is one of the most useful tool in Rails. Okay, with that said, now let's see what a model is exactly. In our previous episode, what we did is we created a controller and then we created a few views like welcome.html.erb and about.html.erb. And what we did is we sent a request to the controller, and what the controller did, it took a view and rendered the view in your browser. It never went to the model or database and fetched some data and gave you back. It never did, because we were not concerned with model in our previous episodes, but today we're gonna work with models. So what model exactly mean? Now what model mean is that if you take any database, like if I take this database and in this I have a table called student, a model is nothing but a class which represents this table, and an object of that class is actually a record in this table. If I have a class for this table called student, and if I create an object for the class, and the object is going to represent any one of the record in this table, the record can be this one, or anything. So that's it. A model is nothing but a class in Ruby, and an object of that class is nothing but a record in a particular table. So now how we create models in in Rails, and how we gonna interact with the tables which are in the database using models. So that's what we're gonna see today exactly. So for that, what I'm gonna suggest is that let's go to our older app blog which we built in SQLite and rename it to blog.old. And now we're gonna create a fresh app in for our blog using the MySQL database. Fine, this will help us to view how model works more easily rather than using SQLite, which I will be showing you later in this video. So head over to the terminal and type in the command rails new and blog, and don't forget to specify the database as MySQL using the D option, which means database. And now hit enter, and now it's going to create the required files for our Rails application as usual. And it also gonna run bundle install. As usual, we're gonna break out of it and then navigate to that particular folder and open it on our favorite code editor, and then go to the gem file, rename the https to http, and remove coffee rails as we are not gonna require it. Save the gem file, run the bundle install, and as the bundles or the gems are installed, make sure that you have your MySQL server running. I have my MySQL server running, and then we have to configure Rails app to use our MySQL by giving the username and password of our database. For that, we have to go to the config folder, and there will be a file called database.yml, and in that you will find the password field. There I will be typing my password, which is ewd, and then so you can see here we have the database by the name blog development. You can change this name, but I suggest to keep the name as blog_development. So let's copy the name of the database and go to our phpMyAdmin or MySQL Workbench, whichever you prefer and use, and go ahead and create a new database with the same name. Create it, and once that's created, let's go and run our Rails server. Once the server has started, go ahead and check whether you have done everything right, and if you have done so, you will see something like, as you know, welcome aboard, you are running Ruby on Rails. Yes, that's it. We see welcome aboard, you are riding on Ruby on Rails. So we have done everything right. So the next thing is we're gonna create blogs, a blog app. So what a blog will have, it's gonna have a number of posts. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna create a controller which is gonna handle these posts. So when the user goes to our app and types /posts, what he should see is he should see all list of posts that other users has done in this particular app. So that's the concept. So we should create a controller which handles this request. So the steps in it is, as you may already know, we have to go to our route.rb file, which is in the config folder, and remove all the unwanted comments. And I'm going to create a new route, and it's going to have a get request, and it's going to take it as posts, and then it's to be redirected to the controller called posts, and here we're going to consider the action as index. So what's the reason I should name the action as index? We'll be seeing the reason in the future videos, but for time being, understand that if you're gonna list something, so you're gonna list all particular post or something in a database, you have to use the action index. Suppose if you have 10 books in your database, if you're gonna list all the books in that database, you should use the action index in that particular controller, right? Then I'm gonna name this route as, let me say it as posts. So I would have a variable in my view calling it as posts underscore path, right? Now I have the route, but I would still not get my app working because I have not created any kind of controller in my app. So for creating the controller, what I have to do is I have to open the terminal in that apps folder again, and now I need to run the command Rails generate. This time I'm gonna generate a controller. The controller name is gonna be posts, and here there is a convention. If you're gonna create a controller for posts, you should be having the name as a plural form. So if you're gonna create a controller for doing some operations with books, you should have the controller name as a plural, that is books. If you're gonna have a controller which is gonna have handle a list of products in a database, you need to name the controller as products. So control names always go as a plural form, right? So posts, and let's hit enter. Now what Rails will do, it will generate the necessary files for the controller posts. Yes, it has created the controller in the folder app controllers post controller, right? And now I have to define the method or the action called index. And now even if I go ahead and reload the page, I would still see an error because I don't have the template or the HTML document, so it says template missing. So I have to go to the views, I would find a folder called posts, I have to create a new file there, and then I am going to name it as index.html.erb. So, and here I am going to type in, here you will see all the posts in the app. So now if I go ahead and reload, it's gonna say here you will see all the posts in the app. So this page is gonna list all the posts did by a particular user or all the users in the app. So that's it. So now we have a controller called posts, and it's now showing an HTML page. Our next task is to create a table or some kind of records in the database so that we can store posts in the database and fetch those data from the database and display it in this particular page. So as I said, if you're going to handle some data in the database in Rails, you need to do it through models. So how you gonna do it with models? For that, you need to create a model in database. As you know, if I want to create a controller in Rails, what I do, I generate a controller. Now I need a model which can handle data in the database. In my case, it's gonna be posts that is done by other users. So I am gonna again generate a model in Rails. For generating the model, the command is again very much straightforward. You need to go ahead, type in the command Rails generate. Here now I have to type in model. Last time we generated a controller, so I typed in controller. Now I'm going to generate a model which is going to handle some data in the database, so I'm giving model. And now here I have to give a name for the model. So let me say this model is going to fetch data about the posts done by the users in my app. So each post is going to be called post. So here the thumb rule or the convention is the name of the model should be always singular. As I said, an object of a model is going to represent a single record in the table. And this model is itself a Ruby class which represents a particular table which is posts. And this model post is going to have one object, and that object is going to represent a particular record in the database. So let me type Rails generate model, and the model name is post. Now let us hit enter. And now Rails is going to go ahead and create a bunch of files, and most of the time we need to take a look at two important files. Let's see what are those two important files when we generate a model in Rails. So now there are two important files which you need to take in. First thing is a file under the DB migrate, and the second file is under app models, and we have a file called post.rb. As you can interpret that the first file is a migration file. You see, it's a file under db migrate, and it's a migration file which says create posts, and let's take a look at it within few minutes. And then we have a file under app models post.rb. Now let's go quickly and see under the app folder. Inside the models folder, I will have a file called post.rb. And as you can clearly see, this is a pure Ruby class which says class post, and it is inheriting from active record : base. As I already said, this is nothing but a class defined in Rails, and there is no need for you to worry about it. You just worry that this post model is just a class. And the second file which was generated is under this folder db migrate, and the file is called create posts. Now if you remember the last video, we have had a look at something called migrations. So what were migrations? Migrations are nothing but changes that you make to the database. So when you add a table to the database, you make a migration. When you remove a table from the database, you do a migration. When you add a column to the table, you do a migration. Now if I create a model, Rails understands that you need to create some kind of table in the database so that you can store data in it. So now I'm creating a model called post to store data about the blog posts in the database. So what Rails is, I'm going to create a table in the database with the name post, so that this model called post can store data in that particular table. So now as the code generator says that it's creating a table by the names posts. As I said, table names are always plurals. It takes posts, and the model names are singular because it represents just a single record, and this post represents a bunch of records, so it is of the plural form. Right now here you need to specify what are the fields that you need for this blog post, and most of the posts in the blog would have the first column as title, which is the title of the blog, and the second is gonna have a type of text. What this type text? Type is nothing, text is nothing but something larger. It can store up to 50,000 characters, and string is nothing but a varchar which can store only up to 255 characters. You know, titles are shorter, so it's enough to have 250 characters, but the body of every blog post is gonna be bigger. It should have almost 50,000 characters, so we are taking the type text in this case, right? So now, as I already said in the previous video, we should change the method name from change to up, and we need to also define another name called method called down, and reverse the change what we did in the up method. In the up method we created table, so in the down method we're gonna reverse it by dropping the table. So I call drop table posts. Now with that done, we have successfully created a model, but this change is not reflected in your database. If I go to the phpMyAdmin, if I go to the blog development database, there are no tables which can store data. Now we want to store data, so how we do? We apply the change in the database. How we apply the change in the database, which are in the migrations? We use the command rake db::migrate, which you have seen in the last video. So I run rake db::migrate. And now this is going to take all the files in the migrate folder, compile it, and apply the change to the database. Now what happens? We have a model which can handle some data in the database, which it's going to handle the data in the database by the table name posts. So now if I go and see in the structures, we have a table called posts, and this post has a structure of an ID, which I have already said it's a primary key by default used by Rails, and we have a title and a body. And next you can see something called created and updated, and this is internally managed by Rails, which we will see later in the upcoming videos. Now don't care about that, just understand that we have created a model called post, and it's gonna handle data in the database block development. And what data it's gonna handle? It's gonna handle the data in the table name posts, which you have created through these migrations. Okay, so that's the concept. You create a model post, and that's gonna handle data by storing, retrieving, and all those stuffs in the table called post. So with that done, now if I go ahead and go to my app, if I don't see any kind of error, we are good. We have created a model successfully. But now, how we actually access those models? What's the use of those models? For understanding those models, we're gonna use something called interactive Ruby terminal, right? So if we go to the terminal, and type in IRB, this is nothing but an interactive Ruby terminal where you can type in Ruby commands and play with it and understand Ruby better. But we are not going to use this IRB directly, because this IRB does not have the classes, controllers which you have created in our Rails app. So what we need is we need to load all the class definitions and the controller definitions which you have defined in the Rails applications. How we do it? We can do it simply using this command, Rails console. So what does this command do? This command, what it does is it takes all the class which we have defined in the Rails application and adds that to the IRB and then loads the IRB. So what magic it does is, in the IRB we will have access to the class which we created. That is, we would have the access to the post class which we just created. So now if I type in Rails console and hit enter, it's gonna load all the classes in our Rails application and boot up the IRB, which is nothing but the interactive Ruby terminal. So now we can see there is something like loading development environment, which means I have loaded the Rails app into this interactive Ruby terminal. As I said, here we can access the class which I have defined in the Rails application. As I said, post is itself a class in the Rails application. So if I type in post with P caps, which means class names always start with the first letter in the uppercase. Now if I hit enter, you'd see it says some kind of statement, which means we are not getting an error. If I type something which is undefined, I would see an error called undefined local variable or method. But if I type in which is defined, for example this class, I am not getting any kind of errors, which means we have a class called post, right? Now let me reload the terminal. Now what we're gonna do now is we gonna create an object to this class. In Ruby, how we create an object for the class? It's simple. You give a variable object name. Let me now call the object name as post, and equals post is the class name, and I'm going to create a new instance for it. So we type in post.new. This is similar to something like in Java, new post parenthesis, which calls the constructor in the post class and returns a new object. But in Ruby, the syntax is you give the class name .new, which in turn calls the constructor in the class post. You can either give the parenthesis or omit the parenthesis. It's not a matter because it's a kind of syntax which Ruby owns. So what this means is you're going to call the constructor in the post class, and you are going to create a new instance of the post class, and it's going to be written and stored in this post object. So if I hit enter, it says it has created an object. If you see, this has an ID nil, which means no ID. Then it says title nil, which means it has no title, and body nil, which means it has no body content, and created and updated are also nil. Now I can type something like post.title. As you see, this object post has an attribute title, so I can set it through the dot operator like Java's or C++. So post.title equals, I'm going to say this as first post, and then I'm going to type the body content as this is my first post. Hooray! Right, now I have given the title and the body, but this change won't be reflected in my database. If I go to the table and click browse, I won't see any change because I have created an object, I have given the title property and the body property, but I have not told Rails to save this object to the database. So how I tell Rails that I need to save this object in my database? For that, what you need to do is post.save. And now what this does is it's gonna take this object and it goes to the post table and inserts this title and body in that particular table. Now if I go and click browse, you'd see a single record with ID as 1 and title as first post and body as this is my first post. Hooray! And created and updated or automatically generated by Rails. This will be useful in the future videos which will be using for saying at what time this post was created. In most of the applications like Facebook, if you see, it would say this post was created 2 hours ago, it was created 3 hours ago. So we will be using this data which was given by Rails in our future videos for showing similar kind of data. So the bottom line is, using models, we have created an object to a class which is of name post, and we have set the attributes of the object like title and desk and body, and saved that object to our database using the save method. So this is one of the method available in the object post. Other important methods available in post is this post.all. So what this all method means? This all method means it's going to take all the objects in our database. Okay, right? So it's going to take all the objects in our database and return it. So if I see post.all, sorry, I hope I have made a mistake, sorry, this post.all method is not available in a particular object. It's actually a static method, so it should be called on the class itself. So I need to use the class name which is post and .all. Since it's a static method, it will be available only in the class name. So if I type post.all, I would get an array. If you see, this is an array. This is an array of posts. The first thing says ID as 1, title as first post, and the body as this is my first post. Hooray! Now if I create another new post and set the title to something like second post and the body to this is my second post, hooray, and also save this object to the database. Now if I go ahead and see, there are 2 records in my table, and if I type in post.all, which is the class name, this is a static method, so it should be called on the class name .all. I'm getting two records now. It's saying it gives all the records in the particular table by name posts, right? So this is what we need. We need to get all the posts done by the users in my app. So this is what I'm going to display in my page called index.html.erb, right? Okay, let's go ahead to our app here, which in the page index.html.erb. Here I'm going to list all the posts in my app. So let me remove this. Now what I need is I need all the list of posts done by the users. As you remember, views or users don't interact with the database. It's the responsibility of the controller to interact with the model, and the model in turn interacts with the database. So in the view, you should not be accessing the model. So what we need to do, we go to the controller. We have the post controller hot here, and this post controller has the action called index. Here what we do, we access the database. By how we access the database, we have the class method called post, and then we call a method on it called all. So what it does, it takes all the records in the table post and returns it. So we need to capture this in a variable. So how I'm gonna capture? I'm gonna capture this in a variable called posts equals post.all. However, this variable won't be available in our view because this variable won't be available in our views because this is not an instance variable. How we make this variable an instance variable? We go to the variable name and add an at in front of it. Now this variable can be accessed in our views using the same name at post. So now if I go back to the index.html.erb, as you may know, this is actually a list of posts. It's nothing but an array. So how we handle an array in the database in the views? If you remember, in the first video we have used something called each, which will iterate through each element in an array. So if you are getting an array which is at posts, so I'm gonna handle this array using the that each iterator. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna use the embedded Ruby tag, and I'm gonna use the at posts dot each do, and it's gonna return a variable called post. So it's gonna take the array post. For each element in this array, it's gonna be stored in this particular post variable, and it's gonna be displayed right here. And I want to display the title in the h1 tag and the content in the paragraph tag. So what I do, I use a h1 tag and I use the embedded Ruby tag with the equal symbol so that I can output this variable in my browser. I say post dot title. So you may know post is actually an object and that has an attribute title, so I can use it as post.title. Then I want to use the paragraph tag and use the embedded Ruby tag with an equal symbol so that I can output it to my browser, and I say post.body. Right, that's it. I'm taking all the posts in my database, which is given by this post.all method, and it's stored in an instance variable called posts in the controller, and I'm accessing this post object, which is an array, and I'm iterating through it using the each iterator, and I am displaying the title and the body with title in the h1 tag and the post in the paragraph tag. Now if I go to my blog app and reload this page, I would successfully see an h1 tag showing the title and the description. Now these data are taken from the database. Now if you go to the database and like insert a new record saying this is a new post, this post is from database, and say go. If I go to browse, you see three records. Now if I reload the page, you would see the newly inserted post in your page. So this is dynamic, it's taking data from the database. Now this post object which we have seen in our IRB or the interactive Ruby terminal not only has this method, it has plenty of methods. Another important and useful method is this. post dot all, and this is gonna return the list of all objects in my database. I'm gonna store it in an instance variable called posts, and now I have posts, and I can call a method in this post called count, and this is gonna return me the number of objects or number of element in this array, like simply like length method in the Java array, and this is going to return the number of objects in that particular at post, right? So this can be used in one of the important part in our app. So let's see what is it. So today we're gonna see another important concept called pluralize helper method. So as you know, as I have said in the first video, helper methods are nothing but it's gonna generate some HTML elements in your view rather than you have to type it. So what we do is we write an embedded Ruby tag, and here we call a method called pluralize. Hope my spelling is correct. And this pluralize is a method, it's a Ruby method which is defined in Rails, and this takes two arguments. The first is a count. So let me say I have one, and then next thing is a singular word. Let me say the singular word as post, right? Post. Now if I reload the page, it's gonna say one post, nothing fancy in it. You'd say I would go ahead and simply type one post in this, right? You'd say it's better rather than using this helper method. What's the use of this? But if I change this count 1 to 2 and go ahead and reload the page, it's gonna say 2 posts. You have specified here only the singular form, but what Rails does is if the count is 1, it would use the singular form of it, one post. If it has 0, then you may know by English grammar you should say as 0 posts, not 0 post. So this is very helpful in many situations. Suppose you want to say the number of posts in my application, and you don't want to mess your head with saying if we have zero posts in my application, I just say 0 posts, and if I have more than one, I should say 5 posts or 3 posts. If I have only one post, I would say only one post. So this is very much helpful in Rails. So now suppose let's take another more sophisticated example. Suppose if I have an application which says which gives the list of ox. You may know ox, it's an animal, and it's gonna say the list of ox in my zoo, right? Now suppose if I have one ox in my database, I would say simply one ox, right? Now if I have more than one ox, and if I have two ox, what is the plural form of ox? It's oxen, right? So now if I go ahead and reload the page, Rails is more intelligent, and it would use the right plural form. It would use oxens. Similarly, if I have something like a singular form of knife, if I go ahead and reload the page, it would use two knives. So it's using the right plural form. So this is one of the most helpful method in Rails. So what you do is you give the count and just the singular form of it. You will get the right singular or plural form whenever needed, right? Now in our case, I need the plural form or singular form of this word called post. And how many posts we do have? That can be accessed using the method called posts.count. Now you get the whole point. Now this post.count is dynamic and is taken from the database. And if this post.count is just 1, then Rails will use the singular form just post. If this @post.count is more than 1, then Rails will use the plural form of post called posts. So which says 3 posts. Now suppose if I go ahead to the database and delete these 2 and make such that there are only one post in my database, and reload the page, it's gonna say 1 post. So this is one of the most helpful helper method in Rails, which is called pluralize, which is gonna pluralize a particular noun if needed and would not pluralize a noun if not needed. So that's it for today. We have seen how to create models, and those models would in turn create migrations which create tables in the database, and using those models you can interact with the database, and you can play around this with these models in something called the interactive Ruby terminal, which you can use by typing in Rails console, or you can even type in Rails C, which is a shorthand representation of Rails console, and hit enter, and it will load all the classes in your Rails application, and you can access all those classes and methods in this and play around it before you can use those exact methods in your Rails application. So that's simple. Hope today the session went more interesting, and tomorrow we'll be saying in depth into models. Today we have just seen how to list the posts. Tomorrow we will be seeing how to create a new post and insert those posts into the database right from our views using forms, and we'll be also seeing how to edit those posts and also how to destroy those posts from our reviews rather than in the interactive Ruby terminal. So that's it. Don't forget to like this video. If you are not subscribed yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thank you.